So today I'm going to read a little teaser for you of the insignificant events in the life of a cactus. And the author is Dusti Bowling. So the summary here says, Avon Green didn't lose her arms in an alligator wrestling match or a wildfire in Tanzania. That's just what she tells people when she gets that look. The truth is, Avon was born without arms, but at age 13, that hasn't stopped her from doing almost anything. Then her parents take a job running Stagecoach Pass, a rundown Western theme park in Arizona, and Avon has to leave everything she knows behind. Avon struggles to make friends at her new school, and where the kids can't seem to see past her missing arms. But her life takes another unexpected turn when she meets Connor, a classmate who also feels isolated because of his own disability. Together, they discover an old storage shed at the park that holds bigger secrets than Avon could ever have imagined. It's hard to solve the mystery, help a friend, and face your fears. But Avon's about to find out what she's capable of and how far from insignificant she really is. So I'll show you this page because it's a signed autographed copy. So it says, to LTS, keep shining, love, Dusti Bowling. So chapter 1. When I was little, a kid pointed at me on the playground and shouted, "Oh, her arms fell off," and then ran away screaming in terror to his mom, who had to cuddle him on her lap and rub his head for like 10 minutes just to get him to calm down. I think up until then, I hadn't thought about the idea that my arms must have actually fallen off at some point in my life. I had never really thought about not having arms at all. My missing arms weren't an issue for me or my parents. I never once heard either of them say, "Oh no, Avon can't possibly do that because that's only for armed people." Or, "Oh, poor Avon is so helpless without arms." Or maybe Avon could do that one day when, if her arms ever would grow back someday. They always would say things like, "Well, you're just going to have to do this differently from other people, but you will manage. And I know this is challenging, but keep trying." And they would tell me, "You're capable of anything, Avon." I had never realized just how different I was until the day that horrible kid shouted about my arms falling off. For the first time, I found myself aware of my total armlessness. And I guess I felt like I was sort of naked all of a sudden. So I, too, ran to my mom, and she scooped me up and carried me away from the park, allowing my tears and my snot to soak in her shirt. As she drove us home that day, I sat whimpering in my car seat and asked her what happened to my arms and why did they fall off. She told me they hadn't fallen off. I was born like that. And I asked her how I could get some new ones. She said I couldn't, and I wailed in despair. She told me to stop crying because having arms was totally overrated. I didn't know what overrated meant at that time because, like I said, I was really little and so was my brain. I kind of figured it out over the next few days, though, because my parents were constantly saying things like, "Oh, coloring this picture with my hands is okay, but only if I could color with my feet like Avon. Now that would be fantastic." And they would say, "Eating spaghetti with my arms is so boring. I wish I could eat with my feet." And the only person I knew who can pick their nose with their toes is Avon. She sure is a special girl. And Dad even went so far as to ask Mom if there were any arm removal services in our area. Growing up, I could do most everything everyone else with arms could do. Eating cereal, brushing my teeth and hair, getting dressed, and yes, even wiping myself. I know, you're instantly wondering how I would do it. And maybe I'll tell you later. Maybe. But until then, you'll just have to live in suspense. Sure, These things take longer for me, and sometimes they take a lot longer. Sometimes I have to use a special tool like a hook or a strap or something like that. And every now and then I want to scream in frustration and kick a pillow until the stuffing comes out because it's taken me 20 minutes to get my pants buttoned, but I can button my pants. I think I can do all of these things because my parents have always encouraged me to figure things out on my own. Well, more like made me figure things out on my own. I suppose if they had always done everything for me, I would be helpless without them. But they didn't, and I'm not. And now that I'm 13 years old, I don't need much help with anything. It's a true story. When I started kindergarten, the kids were a little weirded out by my lack of armage. I got asked just about every day what had happened to my arms, as well as a billion other silly questions like, how do you make farting noises with your armpits when I don't have arms or hands or pits? And how do I play dress up? Which I tried showing them and ended up with a poofy pink tutu thing stuck around my head for about 5 minutes before the teacher finally noticed and helped me pull it down to my waist. I got so tired of telling them the same boring stories about being born without arms that I started making stuff up. I was stinking hilarious. I knew from the first moment that I told a girl my arms had burned off in a fire, I had found a great hobby of making up stories. I loved the way her eyes grew wide with shock and the way her voice went all high-pitched with excitement as she asked me a bunch more questions about my charred arms. Her, well, what kind of fire accident? Me, a wild forest fire burning out of control. Her, well, where? And me, in the mountains of Tanzania. I honestly didn't know where Tanzania was, or if it had any mountains. I think I had heard the name in an episode of Scooby-Doo or something. Her, well, how old were you? And me, oh, just a helpless baby. My mom barely rescued me in time, and she pulled me from a burning crib and raced out of our flaming village, leaving a trail of fire all the way down the mountain as my arms burned to a crisp. They looked like 2 pieces of bacon by the time we got to the village hospital. And another kid standing by said, cooked or uncooked? So I kind of traumatized her and had to have a meeting with my parents and the teacher later about my story. My parents squinted their eyes and pursed their lips and nodded their heads as the teacher told them. Even told another student that her arms burned off in a wildfire in the mountains of Tanzania. And she just peered at them over her glasses, frowning. She also mentioned something about the bacon. I had never seen such serious looks on my parents' faces before, like they were concentrating so hard on being serious that their heads would maybe explode if they blinked. So they said, seriously, they would talk to me about it and shook the teacher's hands seriously and gave me serious looks as we walked seriously out of the school. But I could tell they weren't mad because all the way home, one of them would softly snort and then the other would giggle and then the other would shake from laughing, but trying not to laugh out loud, and on like that all the way home. They later told me to be truthful so I didn't upset any other kids. And so I did for a long time. But then one day in 5th grade, we had a new kid come from our school. I had gone to the same school since kindergarten, so all my friends knew that I was just born with no arms. So when I sat down at lunch with this kid, he said, "Whoa, what happened to your arms?" And all my friends were looking at me, and what can I say? So it just exploded out of me like an overfilled water balloon. I told him this crazy story about how I had rescued a puppy that had been tied to the train tracks just in time before the train nearly ran it over. Just in time for the puppy, but not for poor me. I flattened my arms. You should have seen the look on this kid's face. It was priceless. Oh, my best friend Emily was burst out laughing, and my friend Kayla spit chocolate milk across the table. The new kid realized it was a joke and started laughing too. And pretty soon, everyone was constantly asking me, "Hey, Avon, where did your arms go?" And I would have a new story to tell. And over time, my stories got more and more ridiculous, like like alligator wrestling in the Everglades in Florida, freak roller coaster accidents, skydiving trips gone wrong. I made my stories as ridiculous as possible so people would always know I was joking. I grew up with those kids, and I never felt out of place or anything like that. My armlessness wasn't strange or weird to them because, like I said, I had always gone to the same school. I never imagined my parents would make me leave, and I never thought they would make me move all the way to Arizona and go to a new school right after starting 8th grade. But then again, I never imagined that I would save the Old West, perform for an audience in the desert, and solve a mystery. You'd be surprised at all that I'm capable of, though, even without arms. So we'll go ahead and do chapter 2 because it's a short one. The day Dad told me he wanted to apply for a job as a theme park manager in Arizona, I thought it was quite possible that aliens had taken over his brain. Either aliens or the government. I knew from my great-grandma the government was capable of dreadful things. She was always saying stuff like, if the public only knew what the government was up to, there would be a revolution, and pumping her spotted, wrinkled fist in the air. I wasn't completely sure why an 86-year-old woman who lived in a trailer in Kansas was the only person privy to this top-secret information, but she clearly was. So I wouldn't put it past the government to insert some kind of mind control chip into my dad's brain and force him to run a crumbling theme park in the desert. My parents discussed it with me one night over dinner of buttered noodles, which was my favorite meal. Oh man, I just realized they deliberately buttered me up with buttered noodles. So I got an email from a guy by the name of Joe Kavanaugh. Dad said over his noodles, he owns a place called Stagecoach Pass. Well, what's that? I asked, slurping up a noodle. It's this Western-themed amusement park in Arizona. I guess he found my resume on one of the job sites where I posted it. Anyway, he invited me to apply for the position of general manager at the park. He must have been impressed with your resume, Mr. Big-Time Restaurant Manager, said Mom. Well, said Dad, I'm not really sure how managing a restaurant relates to managing an entire theme park, but I guess a huge part of their business is the steakhouse there, so that's probably why he contacted me. Well, are you going to apply? I asked. Well, it does sound interesting, said Dad, and I scowled. Arizona is really far away. Don't forget you were born there, Sheebs, Dad said. We spent a lot of time there during your adoption, and we really liked it. We even thought it might be a great place to retire one day. The winter is so beautiful, it's warm and sunny. I'm just sick of icy winters. What's the summer like there? I asked, and Mom just grimaced. Ugh, I've heard it's kind of like the surface of the sun. Well, it could be an exciting adventure, Dad waggled his eyebrows at me. Swimming and soccer all year long? And I just glared at my noodles. I don't think I want to play soccer on the surface of the sun. Oh, come on, said Dad. You're such a pro, you could play soccer anywhere. Oh, stop trying to entice me, I said. You haven't even applied yet. Well, if it's okay with you, I would like to. On the one hand, the thought of leaving Kansas and the only home I could ever remember sounded worse than anything. And on the other hand, Dad had lost his job nearly 6 months earlier when the restaurant that he had been managing went out of business. He really needed this job. It's okay with me, I mumbled, feeling like I might cry. So Dad applied, and then he and Mom were invited to go to Arizona for an interview to go check the place out. And then they were invited to stay and run the theme park together. Turns out it was more of a two-person job. And so we sold off a ton of our furniture and donated the junk we didn't need and packed the rest of our belongings into a giant pod that would magically disappear from Kansas and magically reappear in Arizona a week later. We drove our old car over 1,000 miles westward across the country, praying the entire time we wouldn't break down. We managed to make it in one single long day without stopping at a hotel until we got to Phoenix. And by the time we arrived, Dad's eyes looked like atomic fireballs, and Mom's hair looked like she had taken a spin in a hairspray cyclone. Early the next morning, we drove by the giant covered wagon with Stagecoach Pass printed on it in large brown block letters, and I saw the park for the first time. I knew for sure the government and mind control chips had to have been involved with this. So that's the end of chapter 2. So we'll stop there. Kind of gives you a good little snapshot of what's to come. It's a very good book. So I would highly recommend it, and we'll see you again soon.